Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are exploring a staggering claim that, if true, would basically obliterate every history book and, well, rewrite the foundations of modern faith.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Imagine a device supposedly assembled in secret, maybe within the walls of mid-century Europe somewhere, capable of pulling images and sounds directly from the past. Not metaphorically, but, scientifically.
Right. The idea that history isn't lost, it's just hidden, waiting to be tuned in.
Exactly. What if it's just waiting for the right frequency?
That is the ultimate lure, isn't it? And the profound mystery, really, at the core of our deep dive today, the Chronovisor.
The Chronovisor.
We're tackling the legend of this machine that allegedly allowed its inventor to observe history's most pivotal moments. We're talking the Last Supper, the Crucifixion.
Wow.
Even listening to lost Roman tragedies, stuff like that.
Okay, let's unpack this incredible narrative. Because we need to be clear, we are treating the Chronovisor not as like a hunt for a secret machine.
No, definitely not.
But as an in-depth analysis of what seems to be a uniquely resilient modern myth.
It's a very modern myth, yeah.
Our mission here is to navigate the claims, which are often contradictory, look at the verifiable facts, the intense speculation surrounding it, and importantly, the definitive unknowns.
And we're going to try and maintain a strictly neutral viewpoint throughout this.
Absolutely. We want to illuminate the structure of this powerful story because it manages to blend concepts from, well, quantum physics almost, with deep Catholic mysticism. It's quite a mix.
It really is. And to understand the genius of the myth, maybe, we first need to establish its key definition. What was the Chronovisor supposed to be?
Right. Because it's not what you usually think of with time travel.
No, exactly. The Chronovisor is not a device for physical time travel. That's crucial. It very cleverly sidesteps all those classical grandfather paradoxes that plague science fiction.
Okay.
It's described more as a passive time viewer. Think of it like a sophisticated television tuned to history, or maybe a historical voyeur machine.
A historical voyeur machine. I like that. And that conceptual limitation is critical, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It means the threat of the Chronovisor wasn't that you could, say, go back and stop Caesar crossing the Rubicon or something like that.
Right. You couldn't change anything.
Instead, the danger was supposed to be the destabilizing, maybe earth-shattering power of absolute true knowledge of the past.
The definitive truth itself. That was the danger.
Not chaos, but truth.
Precisely. The narrative states that users could observe past events visually and audibly, but interaction was impossible.
Okay.
And this impossibility of creating paradoxes made the story internally viable, you see. And it also set the stage for the alleged reasons for its suppression.
Ah, right. Why would such a world-changing device need to be hidden?
Because the truth itself was deemed too dangerous. That's the claim.
But how is this supposedly achieved? I mean, it needed some kind of technical veneer, right?
Yeah.
A scientific-sounding explanation to bridge that gap between, well, faith and technology.
It did. This wasn't presented as just magic. It was supposedly rooted in chronotopology.
Chronotopology. Okay, that sounds very technical.
Doesn't it? It's a very specific technical-sounding term, and it gives the whole idea the necessary weight. Chronotopology is the supposed study of the spatial and temporal location of objects and events, linking them perpetually to their echoes.
Echoes.
Yeah, the foundational principle claimed that every single event, every word spoken, every ray of light emitted, leaves behind persistent energy traces, or maybe vibrations, or electromagnetic echoes.
Imprinted in the fabric of space-time somehow.
That's the idea. So history isn't gone, it's just diffused. Scattered.
Okay, so the device's job isn't to create something new, but just to, like, gather up and reconstruct these scattered residual energies that haven't entirely dissipated.
Exactly. They claim these traces could be captured and focused. It's like if you think of a vast, still ocean.
Okay.
Every ripple, every wave eventually dissipates, right? But maybe the memory of that energy, the subtle displacement of water, remains at some subatomic level.
And the Chronovisor was supposed to be the ultimate signal processor.
That's the pitch, capable of isolating that incredibly faint historical echo from the overwhelming background noise of the universe.
And the machine itself. The descriptions make it sound like a beautiful artifact of its time, a real blend of recognizable tech and, well, unattainable wonder.
It's the perfect blend, isn't it? Mid-century high-tech meets wonder material. Descriptions always include elements familiar from the 1950s.
Like
Well, the viewing mechanism was apparently a standard cathode ray tube, basically an old-style television screen.
Okay, familiar.
And it supposedly had numerous dials and knobs, including this crucial component called a direction finder.
A direction finder for time.
Not for physical location, but for precisely tuning the spatial and temporal coordinates of the past event they wanted to view.
That grounding in recognizable electronics is key, I think. It makes the impossible feel just a bit more tangible.
It does, but then you have the single essential element that pushes it firmly into the realm of the fantastic.
The antenna.
The antenna. A series were described, but 3 of them were allegedly composed of mysterious or unspecified metals.
Oh, the secret ingredient.
Exactly. This is the crucial, unfalsifiable component. These special antennae provide the mechanism that allows the device to capture energies supposedly beyond the range of known 20th century physics.
It's the ultimate narrative device, isn't it? A secret alloy known only to the chosen few. Prevents replication, prevents any real scientific critique.
Precisely.
That narrative, structure-grounded, sort of scientific sounding, and then laced with this single unique impossibility, that's exactly what makes a myth like this so durable.
It mirrors the science fiction of the era, actually.
Which suggests we should probably look closely at the man who allegedly brought this whole idea to life.
Absolutely.
Because for a claim this astonishing to gain any serious traction, it really had to come from an individual whose credibility was, well, on multiple fronts, pretty unimpeachable.
Right. And that central figure in this whole narrative is Father Pellegrino Ornetti. We really need to spend some time detailing his real identity because it's absolutely essential to the myth's authority.
Okay.
Ornetti, who lived from 1925 to 1994, wasn't some fringe figure, you know. He was a highly respected Benedictine priest and a true intellectual polymath.
We're talking about a serious scholar here, world class even.
Absolutely. He was a renowned musicologist, considered one of the foremost authorities on Gregorian chants and archaic musical forms. That was his main field.
Impressive.
He was also a linguist, fluent in numerous ancient and modern languages. He had a strong demonstrated interest in physics and electroacoustics, often working in specialized labs.
Okay, so the science connection is there.
Yes. And, perhaps most dramatically, he was a practicing exorcist within the Catholic Church.
Wow. Musicologist, physicist, linguist, and exorcist. That combination is, well, it feels tailor-made for crafting a believable, culturally impactful story like this.
It really does. This wasn't just some monk who dabbled in things. This was a person operating right at the intersection of the spiritual, the academic, and the technical.
And each of those facets seems essential to the story.
Every single one provided crucial scaffolding for the Chronovisor claim. Think about the narrative necessity of each part.
Okay.
His status as a musicologist supplied the pure academic motive.
Right. He wasn't after power or money.
Exactly. He was supposedly just obsessed with recovering lost art. His passion for recovering the lost Roman tragedy, Thyestes, provided this noble intellectual justification for pursuing the technology in the first place.
It gives the device a benevolent origin story. He built it for culture, not for conquest or anything like that.
Precisely. Meanwhile, his known interest in physics and his actual laboratory work gave him the technical cover story.
Plausibility.
Yeah, the plausibility to have built or at least supervised the construction of such a complex electroacoustical device. He wasn't just speculating about science. People saw him as someone who actually understood the complexities of sound and signal processing.
But the undeniable masterstroke, I think, in the narrative architecture, has to be using his identity as a monk and an exorcist.
That's the spiritual anchor, absolutely. As a respected Benedictine monk, he was seen as a man of moral rigor, unlikely to lie for personal gain.
Trustworthy.
And as an exorcist, he was implicitly someone who grappled with, the profound power of evil and hidden spiritual realities.
Right, dealing with things unseen.
Which lent him the spiritual authority to be trusted with the Chronovisor's potentially terrifying revelations, specifically the idea of witnessing the crucifixion.
It implied he had the moral fortitude needed to understand the device's world-shattering implications, and maybe the strength to keep its secret safe.
He was the perfect liminal figure, wasn't he? Bridging the rational world of science and the secretive world of faith.
Making the fantastic claims sound profoundly credible, especially to a broad audience, maybe particularly those within the Catholic world, who would implicitly trust a high-ranking, scholarly clergyman.
But what's really critical here, though, is the timeline of how the story got popular.
Yes. When did people really start talking about this?
Well, the initial claim surfaced publicly way back in 1972 in an Italian magazine, but it was pretty quickly challenged and it sort of faded away.
Okay, so it didn't stick then.
No, the story gained its true lasting power only after Ernetti was dead.
After 1994. Right. We have to talk about the popularizers then, because they're the ones who really cemented the legend, transforming that nearly debunked claim into this enduring myth.
There are two main figures who published their accounts well after Ernetti's death in 94.
Okay, who are they?
First, there's Father François Brune.
Yeah.
He was a French priest and theologian and apparently a friend of Ernetti's. Brune published his book Le Nouveau Mystère du Vatican, The New Mystery of the Vatican, in 2002. And Brune presented the Chronovisor story as basically a personal confidence shared by Ernetti, lending it the weight of, a deathbed truth.
Shared between friends?
Oh.
Makes sense. And the second major source?
That was Peter Krasa. He's an author who tends to focus on mysterious technologies and historical anomalies, that kind of thing.
Right.
Krasa published Father Ernetti's Chronovisor, first in German in 1997, then an expanded American edition came out in 2000.
And Krasa focused more on?
He heavily emphasized the academic component, framing Ernetti's motivation as that burning love of music, specifically for the lost play Thyestes.
Ah, the musicologist angle.
Exactly. And Krasa's edition was the one that famously circulated the alleged Latin text fragment of Thyestes to the public.
We'll definitely come back to that fragment. But this timing,
Mm-hmm.
it seems highly suspicious, doesn't it? It's crucial for analyzing this.
It absolutely is.
The initial claims were dismissed back in the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
but the definitive, detailed, sort of authoritative books only appear after Ernetti is securely in the grave.
This is the critical mechanism of what you might call the posthumous revival. Once Ernetti was dead, he became unassailable.
Right. Can't ask him any awkward questions.
Exactly. He couldn't be questioned about discrepancies in his story, nor could he be held accountable for the, questionable evidence he supposedly presented.
His passing allowed the narrative to shift, didn't it?
Yeah.
It transformed him from maybe a potential hoaxer or even just a well-meaning academic who got something wrong
Into this heroic, tormented genius figure.
Yeah. The story must be true because, naturally, the truth could only come out after he'd been silenced either by death itself or by powerful forces intent on suppression. It works either way.
It creates a perfectly insulated narrative. His death didn't end the story. You could argue it provided the sort of martyrdom necessary for the legend to really thrive.
That initial debunked newspaper story from '72 gets instantly reborn as this durable, unassailable legend, safely embellished by those who championed his memory after he was gone.
A very effective strategy, intended or not.
So if we accept the popularizers' accounts, at least for the sake of argument, we have to look at what the Chronovisor allegedly revealed. Because they didn't just claim they were tuning into random moments in history, did they?
No, not at all. The list of viewings seems very strategically curated.
Curated for maximum impact.
Yeah, maximum Western cultural, historical, and especially theological impact. It really is the historical equivalent of a tightly packed greatest hits album.
Okay, so what were the big hits?
Well, the first and arguably the most profound claim was for religious validation.
This has to be the Crucifixion viewing.
That's the one. The primary viewing was allegedly the Passion and Crucifixion of Jesus Christ. This is the absolute centerpiece of the whole claim.
Just imagine.
Ernetti reportedly claimed to have witnessed the entire event, offering empirical validation for the central tenets of Christian faith. The viewing was supposedly meticulous, detailing Christ's physical appearance, the immediate surroundings, the emotional tenor of the crowd.
Actual footage.
The sheer audacity of that claim is what really cemented the story in the public consciousness, offering technological proof of divinity, basically.
Beyond the huge religious claim, it also had to appeal to Ernetti's scholarly side, right? His background.
Exactly. Which brings us to the classical heritage viewing.
Okay.
This was the academic proof, the viewing of a full performance of the lost tragedy Thyestes.
The play he was supposedly obsessed with recovering.
Written by Quintus Ennius, supposedly performed in Rome in 169 BC. Ennius is known as the father of Latin poetry, so recovering this foundational piece of European culture provided that pure, non-theological, intellectual motive.
So the machine was justified not just by faith, but by this mission to restore lost human knowledge. Makes sense.
And then, to broaden the appeal beyond just scholars and priests, they added the ultimate historical spectacle viewing category, great man history.
Ah, the famous figures.
Exactly. This list included easily recognizable, pivotal moments designed for broad popular appeal. Ernetti claimed to have seen speeches by the great Roman orator Marcus Tullius Cicero,
Okay.
moments of military importance involving Napoleon Bonaparte,
Right.
and even footage from 20th century history, specifically mentioning Benito Mussolini, plus various Roman Senate meetings and things like that.
Basically, front row seats to the moments history textbooks always highlight.
Pretty much, yeah.
But what's really revealing about this list, maybe, is what's missing. From a critical standpoint, what does the conspicuous absence of, say, mundane history or non-Western history tell you?
Well, it screams fabrication, doesn't it?
How so?
A machine capable of dialing into any moment in time.
Yeah.
Well, inevitably, you would expect it to be used for far more varied research. Yet we don't hear about viewings of ordinary life.
Like what?
No claims of watching, I don't know, a peasant family eat dinner in medieval England. Or verifying the true layout of the Library of Alexandria. Or observing daily commerce in ancient Mesopotamia. Or the workings of the imperial court in ancient China. Nothing like that.
The list is entirely focused on moments that directly feed into Western, specifically Christian, cultural narratives.
It's too perfect, too convenient. It really suggests the list was fabricated purely for maximum narrative impact on the intended audience.
It feels like it reflects the specific cultural anxieties and obsessions of maybe the mid-20th century Italian Catholic intellectual class where Ernetti operated.
I think that's a fair assessment, and to make the scientific side of this perfect narrative work, Ernetti couldn't really claim he did it all alone. That wouldn't be plausible.
Right. He needed backup, credibility.
He needed stolen authority, as you might call it, and he supposedly borrowed from the very peak of 20th century scientific achievement.
How? Who did he claim helped him?
The Chronovisor project was allegedly a secret collaboration. It involved a team of 12 prominent scientists.
12.
Okay, but here's the key technique. Only 2 of them were ever named publicly, and they were, of course, absolute titans of global science.
Let me guess. Big names.
Huge names. The first was Enrico Fermi, Nobel Prize-winning physicist, often called the architect of the nuclear age.
Wow. Fermi. Okay.
The second was Wernher von Braun, the famed German rocket scientist who developed the V-2 missile and later spearheaded the United States' Apollo missions to the moon.
Fermi and von Braun. Naming those two provides instant, undisputed scientific gravity to the whole project.
Absolutely. Undisputed giants of mid-century big science.
And the other 10 scientists.
Well, they conveniently wished to be anonymous.
Of course they did.
Which is the classic conspiracy technique, right? Used to shield a potential hoax. You provide 2 massive, verifiable names to legitimize the claims.
And the rest of the supposed team is safely hidden behind this cloak of secrecy and maybe institutional fear.
Exactly.
But the crucial, undeniable fact we have to keep coming back to is the timing of these claims about the collaborators.
Yeah.
The Chronovisor story, and specifically the naming of Fermi and von Braun, didn't really gain widespread circulation until the 1990s, long after the initial 1972 article.
Long after both men were gone. Fermi died way back in 1954.
Right.
And von Braun died in 1977.
So this reliance on dead witnesses, it's probably the most obvious red flag in the entire story.
It really is. These men can neither confirm nor deny their involvement. Their immense, undeniable scientific achievements are just retroactively attached to this unproven, likely non-existent machine.
It makes the collaboration claim completely unfalsifiable. By placing the authority in the hands of the deceased, the narrative creators basically shielded themselves from the most basic level of investigative journalism or fact-checking.
Any attempt to verify the team is met with either silence, the claim of anonymity, or, well, a grave marker.
Okay, so we've established that the Chronovisor narrative is, well, structurally brilliant in a way. It borrows authority, it strategically curates its claims for maximum impact.
That's a well-crafted story. It is. However, the true test of any extraordinary claim like this has to be the tangible evidence it provides.
Right. Show me the proof.
And this is precisely where the Chronovisor legend completely and definitively collapses under scrutiny.
This is where it gets really interesting, I think, because the debunking of the evidence seems pretty immediate and irrefutable.
It was. Ernetti offered, essentially, 2 primary pieces of proof. One aimed at the faithful, and one aimed more at the academics.
Okay, let's start with the one for the faithful.
We begin with case study 1, the photograph of Christ. This was intended to be the ultimate smoking gun.
The big reveal.
It was published in that Italian magazine, La Domenica del Corriere, on May 2nd, 1972, right at the peak of the initial public interest. Ernie claimed this image was a physical souvenir, a direct photograph taken from the Chronovisor screen during the crucifixion viewing.
An actual picture of Jesus on the cross captured by a time viewing machine. Just whack.
The claim was absolutely world-stopping. But the moment the image was circulated, skeptics, particularly art historians, instantly recognized the subject matter.
So Ernetti's moment of glory was pretty short-lived.
Extraordinarily short-lived.
What did they find out about this photograph? How was it debunked?
Well, the image turned out to be, frankly, low-effort fabrication. It demonstrated either extreme carelessness on Ernetti's part or maybe supreme confidence that nobody would actually investigate it properly.
Okay.
Firstly, the photograph was conclusively proven to be a reverse image of a commercially available postcard.
A postcard, you mean like something you could buy in a shop?
Exactly. A commonplace object, easily bought in religious shops, especially in Italy and Spain at the time.
Okay, so it wasn't even a unique image he presented. And what about the subject itself? Was it a photo of a real person from history?
Not even close. The postcard depicted a wooden crucifix sculpture, not a real historical individual.
It was a statue.
Yes. And the sculpture was specifically identified. It's the work of a renowned Spanish sculptor named Lorenzo Culavallera.
Okay.
And he created it in 1931. It's a modern piece of religious art.
So let me get this straight. The photo from the Chronovisor was actually a reversed image
Yes.
of a postcard
Yes.
depicting a wooden statue carved in 1931, nearly 2,000 years after the crucifixion supposedly happened.
That is precisely it. It is definitive, irrefutable proof of fabrication. And the original artwork, it's not lost to time either. It's still housed and observable today in the Santuario dell'Amore Misericordioso in Colle Valenza, Italy. Anyone can basically go and see it.
Wow. That proves, without any shadow of a doubt, that the primary piece of visual evidence offered back in 1972 was a hoax, period.
Absolutely. The question then becomes, how did Ernetti himself initially react to this catastrophic collapse of their main evidence?
Did they retreat, apologize, admit they were wrong?
Not exactly. They implemented the classic escape hatch response. They essentially doubled down on the supernatural aspects to try and explain away the physical proof.
How do they do that? That sounds tricky.
Well, when faced with the undeniable fact that the photo matched a 1931 sculpture, proponents offered this rather bizarre counterclaim.
Okay.
They suggested that the sculptor, Valera, hadn't just carved any crucifix. He had merely carved a precise rendering of a vision seen by a Spanish nun.
A vision.
Yes. And according to this new narrative twist, this mystical vision just happened to be the exact true image of Christ that the Chronovisor also captured.
So the argument shifts completely. They're no longer arguing about a technological photograph.
Exactly.
They're arguing about divine visions and maybe prophetic artistic creation.
Precisely. It renders the evidence untestable all over again. Instead of verifying a machine, the skeptic now has the impossible task of disproving a supernatural vision supposedly seen by a long-dead nun.
The physical proof of fabrication is just explained away by adding this untestable supernatural layer, making sure the myth can survive, regardless of the facts.
It's a common tactic in these kinds of stories.
Okay, now let's move to the second piece of evidence. This one was aimed more at the academic community, right?
Yes. Case study 2, the Thyestes fragment.
The bit of the lost play.
This was the academic smoking gun. It was intended to provide the intellectual justification for the device's existence, showing that Ernetti's musicological motive was real. He had supposedly succeeded in recovering a foundational piece of Latin literature.
And this fragment was published prominently in Peter Crass's American edition of his book, right?
That's correct. It was put out there for scrutiny.
And this evidence was scrutinized not by art historians this time, but by classicists and linguists. Basically, Ernetti's own academic peer group. What was their conclusion?
The analysis was swift and just as conclusive as the Christ photo debunking.
What did they find?
The text was identified as a modern forgery. It was widely distributed and analyzed by scholars who specialize in archaic Latin, the language Ennius would have used.
And what specific errors or inconsistencies did the linguists find? This is the kind of detail our listeners appreciate.
Well, they found profound inconsistencies in the text's linguistic fingerprint. Quintus Ennius wrote in a very specific style of early Latin from the 2nd century BC. He used archaic grammatical structures and vocabulary that later fell out of use as Latin evolved.
Okay.
The Thyestes fragment that was published displayed grammar, word choices, and syntactical structures that were distinctly post-classical, meaning they were more akin to what you would expect from maybe a 20th century Latin scholar attempting to compose ancient verse, rather than a genuine text from 169 BC.
It's like the linguistic equivalent of finding an anachronism in a historical movie.
Right.
Like seeing a Roman general check his wristwatch, but with words.
That's a great analogy. The text was internally inconsistent with its alleged origin. A real document from Enni's time would be linguistically raw and complex in a specific, archaic way.
And this fragment wasn't.
No. The published fragment was found to be, well, too clean, too grammatically predictable in places, and it demonstrated a more modern understanding of classical structures than you'd expect from Ennius himself.
So the very proof intended to validate the device's academic capability actually provided irrefutable proof of its inauthenticity.
It backfired, essentially. Yes.
If we synthesize this, the pattern is pretty devastating for the Chronovisor's credibility.
It really is.
The photographic evidence is a reversed postcard of a modern sculpture. The textual evidence is a modern linguistic forgery. Every single tangible piece of proof offered for the Chronovisor is demonstrably fraudulent.
Correct.
Which naturally leads us to question the origins of the idea itself. Where did this concept even come from?
Right. If the evidence is fabricated, we have to look for the conceptual source. The story needed an official origin story, didn't it? Something that sounded both scientific and miraculous.
Something that would appeal to the spiritual community, maybe Father Ernetti's base.
Exactly, and that official origin is the story of the Gemelli incident, which allegedly occurred in 1952.
Okay, 1952. What was the Gemelli incident?
This incident provides the faith-based cover story for the whole project. Ernetti claimed he was working in an electroacoustical lab at the Catholic University of Milan, and he was working with Father Agostino Gemelli.
Gemelli. Wasn't he a pretty important figure?
A very formidable figure. He was the founder of that university, a key figure in the Pontifical Scientific Academy. His involvement immediately lends high institutional weight to the story.
Okay, so what exactly happened in the lab, according to the story?
They were working on a complex project, involved filtering Gregorian chants on a magnetic tape recorder, one of the early ones.
Right, old tech now, but cutting edge then.
Exactly. And Father Gemelli, apparently in a moment of frustration with the equipment, instinctively uttered a short prayer or maybe a lament. Something like, "Oh, Dad, help me, please." His own father had recently passed away.
Okay, a moment of frustration. And the incredible claim.
When they replayed the tape later, Gemelli supposedly heard a voice respond. A voice saying, "Of course I help you. I am always with you."
Wow.
And Gemelli apparently recognized it as his deceased father's voice captured on the magnetic tape.
Okay, that's quite something.
This miraculous incident, supposedly involving two high-ranking priests in a high-tech lab, allegedly led Ernetti to believe that sound, and by extension light, must somehow persist in the environment in a measurable way.
Providing the foundational spiritual and scientific principle for the Chronovisor's development, that spiritual persistence is somehow scientifically measurable.
That's the official story. It beautifully blends technology and faith. But if that was the cover story, what was the likely true source of the Chronovisor idea?
Where did it really come from?
Well, the likely true source probably isn't a physics lab in Milan at all, but rather contemporary science fiction.
Always a possibility with these things. Which story?
The Chronovisor's design, especially its core function, that passive non-interactive viewing capability, bears a really startling resemblance to a fictional time viewer detailed in a novella by T.L. Sherrod.
Okay.
The novella was called E for Effort, and it was published in 1947.
1947, so that's 5 full years before the alleged miraculous Gemelli incident took place in 1952.
Exactly. The timing is very suggestive. Sherrod's novella provides what looks like a perfect conceptual blueprint.
How so?
It describes a device that uses a complex filtering system to reconstruct light from the past, allowing observers to passively view historical events, just like the Chronovisor. And Sherrod's plot didn't just invent the technology, it explicitly explored the profound societal implications of such a machine.
And those implications? Do they mirror the dangers that Ernetti and Father Brun later cited as the reason the Chronovisor supposedly had to be dismantled and hidden?
The parallels are incredibly strong, yes. Sherrod's story delves right into the potential for misuse spying on historical figures, revealing state secrets, the inevitable erosion of faith when faced with unfiltered history, the loss of privacy, all the exact dangers proponents later used to justify suppressing the Chronovisor.
So it really looks like the chronovisor concept might have been fundamentally plagiarized from 1940s science fiction.
It seems highly likely.
And then maybe retrofitted with that miraculous Gemelli anecdote and the later fabricated evidence to lend it credibility, especially within the clerical scientific community Ernetti belonged to.
It's a remarkable example, potentially, of fictional concepts bleeding into and shaping real-world hoaxes or legends.
Okay, now let's turn to the ultimate scientific obstacle. Regardless of where the idea came from, we have to reiterate the fundamental physical impossibility of the chronovisor, at least under known physics.
This is where we move beyond just the concept and look at the hard constraints of reality. The core claim that light and sound waves from, say, 2 millennia ago can be isolated, captured, and reconstructed into a clear image or sound fundamentally contradicts the second law of thermodynamics.
Energy dissipation.
Yeah.
Explain for us why this law is basically the chronovisor's undoing.
Okay. The second law dictates that in any closed system, energy tends toward entropy, towards disorder, diffusion. Light waves and sound waves, once emitted, radiate outwards.
Right.
As they travel through space and time, they scatter, they degrade, their energy dissipates incredibly rapidly, they become weaker and weaker over distance and time.
So a ray of light emitted during the Crucifixion wouldn't just be waiting in a neat little bundle near Rome for a cathode ray tube to pick it up 2,000 years later.
No. It would be spread infinitesimally thinly across the entire observable universe by now, essentially.
Right.
To isolate a coherent, detailed signal, a specific image, a specific voice from 2,000 years ago, you would need two essentially impossible things based on current understanding.
Okay, what are they?
First, you'd need an absolutely unfathomable amount of energy just to capture and process those incredibly minute scattered photons and sound waves. They've basically become indistinguishable from the background noise of Earth's environment and the wider cosmos.
You're dealing with the ultimate signal-to-noise ratio problem. The noise includes everything, right? Cosmic background radiation, thermal noise from the Earth itself, the static generated by every physical process that has happened since that moment in time.
Exactly. It's an overwhelming amount of noise. Second, even if you could capture them, filtering that unimaginably faint millennia-old echo from all that static, the technological challenge is just, by all known standards, insurmountable.
The signal loss over such a vast temporal distance is immense. Isolating the original information would require physics that operates entirely outside our current understanding, maybe even requiring manipulation of space-time itself on a quantum level just to retrieve the information state.
Pretty much. Even if the information did somehow persist in some theoretical form, actually accessing it in a usable way seems impossible with anything resembling the technology described.
So the science essentially says it's a brilliant conceptual impossibility.
That's the consensus, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so the physical evidence for the chronovisor collapsed almost immediately upon presentation.
Right. The photo, the text fragment, both debunked.
The scientific premise seems utterly implausible based on known physics.
Thermodynamics says no.
And the origin of the idea itself looks suspiciously like it was lifted from science fiction.
E for effort.
Yet, despite all this, the myth persists. It endures. And its endurance seems guaranteed by its final act, its ambiguous and frankly brilliantly structured conclusion.
This is where Father Ernetti's death in 1994 creates what we might call the Schrodinger's confession.
That's a good way to put it. The events surrounding his death in April '94 are perfectly ambiguous, almost engineered for myth-making.
Okay, lay out the two sides.
All right. Claim 1, the deathbed confession. Shortly before he passed away, Ernetti allegedly confessed to fabricating the entire chronovisor story.
He admitted it was all fake.
Supposedly, claiming the Thyestes text was just a modern composition he wrote, and that the Christ photo was indeed a hoax, just like the critics said. This confession was reported via anonymous note, allegedly written by a family member, passed to a journalist.
Okay, for the skeptics and the scientists, this sounds like the tidy end to the story.
Exactly, the final admission of a hoax, resolving the decades-long mystery. Case closed. But the chronovisor myth couldn't allow for such a tidy ending. It would kill the legend. So proponents instantly mobilized with Claim 2, the coerced confession.
Ah, they didn't accept the confession as genuine.
No, they countered that Ernetti was actually coerced or somehow forced into retracting his true claims by powerful, shadowy forces.
And who were these forces supposed to be?
Most frequently, the accusing finger points towards the Vatican itself.
Okay, so in this counter-narrative, Ernetti maintained the device's existence until his final breath.
Yes, and that anonymous confession note, that's just more disinformation. orchestrated by the powerful forces seeking to suppress the dangerous truth of the Chronovisor.
So Ernetti's final moments rendered his position permanently unfalsifiable. He simultaneously confessed and didn't confess.
Precisely. He exists in both states for the believers and the skeptics. For believers, the denial of the confession or the claim it was coerced is definitive proof that the conspiracy is real and powerful enough to silence even a dying man.
For the myth to survive, that ambiguity was absolutely essential. His death became the ultimate proof, in a strange way.
It did. And this leads us directly to the most potent and probably the most self-sustaining element of the entire legend, the enduring Vatican conspiracy.
Right. The story needed a grand, compelling reason why a machine that could literally change the world wasn't in everyday use. Why wasn't it revealed?
And the answer provided was simple. It was too dangerous for mankind.
Too dangerous.
Ernetti allegedly decreed, perhaps with his collaborators, that the machine had to be dismantled, primarily because of the terrifying potential for misuse.
Think about the implications.
A device capable of chronicling every assassination, every secret political meeting, every private moment in all of history.
It would be the ultimate tool for political blackmail, financial manipulation, military intelligence, everything.
The ultimate global surveillance tool, just pointed backwards in time.
So the story goes they had to hide it, or dismantle it and hide the parts or the plans. But where do you hide the ultimate historical surveillance device to make absolutely sure it's never found or misused?
You hide it in the world's most famous attic of forbidden knowledge, the Vatican Secret Apostolic Archives.
Of course. That location is just a masterstroke of conspiracy logic, isn't it?
It really is. And it provides the final, impenetrable layer of insulation against debunking.
Because the Vatican archives are notoriously inaccessible, right?
Yeah.
Held under incredibly tight security. Access is granted only to heavily vetted scholars under very strict conditions, and even then, only to certain sections.
Exactly. This makes the claim permanently unfalsifiable. No journalist, no independent scientist, virtually no external government official can just waltz in there and gain access to browse the archives, to definitively disprove the device's presence, or verify its dismantling.
The Vatican's inherent institutional secrecy becomes the perfect, impregnable shield for the hoax itself.
It couldn't be better designed for that purpose.
And the final narrative reversal is how the Vatican's own silence on the matter gets weaponized by the story's proponents.
Yes. Any powerful institution's refusal to comment on a rather bizarre 20th century story like this would normally just be viewed as dismissal, as not worth their time.
Right. They have bigger things to worry about.
But in the Chronovisor legend, the Vatican's institutional silence is immediately interpreted by proponents as confirmation of a high-level, deliberate cover-up.
So the very act of not addressing the claim is used as evidence against them. Evidence that the claim must be true.
Precisely. The less they say, the more powerful and secretive the alleged conspiracy appears. It feeds itself.
So this incredible myth endures, not because the evidence is strong, as we've seen, it's basically non-existent or fraudulent.
Correct.
But because the narrative itself touches on these profound cultural anxieties, maybe particularly specific to the late 20th and early 21st centuries?
I think so. It speaks to deep suspicions about the true power wielded by secret institutions, doesn't it? It feeds that paranoia that powerful global bodies like the Vatican or governments are actively suppressing world-changing knowledge.
It also taps into that deep human desire, especially in some religious circles, for empirical, scientific-style proof of religious dogma, like seeing the crucifixion for yourself.
Absolutely. And it poses the ultimate ethical question for the information age we live in now. What are the ethics of total retroactive surveillance? If you could know everything, should you?
The Chronovisor remains a fixture in pop culture because of all this. It inspires books, documentaries, fuels endless online discussions.
It just keeps coming back.
Continuously proving that this unique tapestry of technological wonder, spiritual mystery, and state-level paranoia is one of the most durable modern legends ever crafted. Hashtag outro.
So what does this all really mean for you, the listener, trying to make sense of this? Our deep dive reveals the Chronovisor not as some hidden technological marvel waiting to be rediscovered, but as a masterpiece of narrative construction. It's a quintessential modern myth, woven together from threads of mid-century electronics, the authority of Catholic intellectuals, the names of scientific titans, fabricated evidence, and that pervasive cultural suspicion of secret power.
Its endurance really is a testament to its narrative power, not its factual basis at all. We've seen pretty clearly that its power lies in its uncanny ability to withstand factual assault.
Yeah.
By using this self-sustaining conspiracy logic,
Exactly. When the photograph was debunked,
they introduced the divine vision explanation.
when the supposed key scientific collaborators died,
Their involvement became untouchable, unfalsifiable.
when the machine was supposedly dismantled because it was too dangerous.
They hid it, fictionally, in the one place on Earth practically nobody could look: the Vatican archives.
The ultimate synthesis here is that the architects of this story, whether it was primarily Ernetti or later Brune, Crassa, and others who amplified it, constructed a legend that is perfectly shielded from external verification. The tangible evidence is demonstrably fabricated. The original witnesses are deceased. The foundational concept seems plagiarized from science fiction. And the final supposed resting place is locked away behind centuries of institutional secrecy.
It really is a perfect case study, isn't it, in how a deliberate, perhaps yet incredibly compelling hoax or legend can transcend its questionable origins and become this durable, self-sustaining historical narrative in its own right.
It absolutely is.
It certainly leaves us with far more questions about the nature of belief, myth, and conspiracy than it does about physics or time travel.
Well said.
And it leaves you, our listener, with this final provocative thought to perhaps mull over. If history, as we know it, is fundamentally just a collection of curated stories and documents, often selected and preserved by powerful institutions, what happens to our perception of truth when the potential, even the fictional potential, to view the unfiltered past is introduced? If absolute historical knowledge were somehow achievable, what kind of power would truly lie in holding it? And who, if anyone, could possibly be trusted with what might be the ultimate weapon, the weapon of historical revelation?
Think about that the next time you look at a history book, maybe, and wonder what other suppressed truths, real or imagined, might be waiting out there in the shadows of institutional secrecy or just in the fertile ground of human imagination.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.